The blizzard had come without warning, and Wyatt Morgan knew with sickening certainty that his cattle were dying somewhere out there in the white hell that had swallowed the high pasture. He stood in the doorway of his ranch house just outside Pahrump, Nevada, watching the snow fall in thick curtains that obscured everything beyond 20 feet, and felt the old injury in his leg throb with a pain that promised worse to come. It was January 1885, and this was the kind of storm that broke men and buried dreams under 6 feet of killing cold. The temperature had dropped 30 degrees in as many minutes when the front rolled in from the mountains, and now his 100 head of cattle were somewhere up in the foothills, confused and freezing, huddling together in whatever shelter they could find, while ice formed in their nostrils and their body heat slowly bled away into the merciless wind. Wyatt pulled on his heaviest coat, the one lined with sheep's wool that his mother had made him before she passed, and wrapped a thick scarf around his face until only his eyes showed. He strapped on his gun belt more from habit than any expectation of needing it, then reached for his walking stick, the sturdy length of oak that had become his constant companion since a spooked horse had kicked him 2 years back and shattered his knee. The leg had healed crooked, and some days the pain was just a dull reminder of his own mortality. Today, with the cold sinking its teeth into the old injury, it felt like someone was driving hot nails through the joint with every step. His foreman, old Pete Daniels, grabbed his arm as he limped toward the stable. "You cannot go out in this, Wyatt. It is suicide. That leg will not hold you. Those cattle will not bring themselves back," Wyatt said, shaking off the older man's grip. "I have got 2 years of profits on the hoof up there, and I will be damned if I let them freeze because my knee hurts. Then let me go with you. I need you here keeping the home fires burning and making sure the horses in the near paddock do not panic. If I am not back by morning, you know what to do." Wyatt did not elaborate on what that meant. They both understood the stakes. The walk to the stable was only 50 yards, but by the time Wyatt pushed through the door, his leg was screaming and his lungs burned from breathing the frigid air through the scarf. His horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Rust, stood in his stall with his ears pricked forward nervously. The animal could sense the wrongness in the air, the way the storm pressed down on everything like a physical weight. Wyatt saddled him quickly, his fingers already stiff with cold, despite his heavy gloves, and led the horse out into the teeth of the blizzard. Mounting was agony. His bad leg would not bend properly, and he had to use a fence rail to lever himself up into the saddle. Once seated, he touched his heels to Rust's flanks and pointed the horse's head toward the foothills, where he had moved the herd 3 days earlier, chasing the last of the winter grass before the snows came. He had thought he had another week at least. The almanac had predicted a mild January. The almanac had been catastrophically wrong. The wind hit him like a fist once he left the shelter of the ranch buildings. Snow stung his exposed skin and found its way into every gap in his clothing. Rust fought the bit, wanting to turn back, wanting to seek shelter, but Wyatt kept the horse pointed north with steady pressure and soft words that were snatched away by the howling wind before they left his lips. The world became nothing but white and cold, and the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath him. Time lost meaning. He could have been riding for 10 minutes or 2 hours when his leg finally gave out. The pain had been building gradually, a crescendo of agony that he had tried to ignore, but when Russ stumbled in a hidden drift and lurched to the side, Wyatt's knee twisted wrong, and something inside it gave way with a sensation like tearing fabric. He cried out, a sound that was immediately lost in the storm, and nearly fell from the saddle. Only his grip on the horn kept him mounted, and even then he listed badly to one side, his useless leg dangling. He should turn back. He knew it with the kind of crystal clarity that comes only in moments of genuine crisis. If he continued, he might not make it home. The leg would not hold his weight now, which meant if he dismounted, he would not be able to get back on. He would be afoot in a blizzard with a bum leg, and that was a death sentence no matter how tough a man thought he was. But the cattle, God help him, the cattle. They represented everything he had worked for since coming west from Missouri 5 years ago. Every dollar saved, every long day under the brutal Nevada sun, every risk taken and gamble made. If he lost them, he lost the ranch. It was that simple. The bank would foreclose, and he would be back to working for wages, no longer his own man, no longer building something that could last. Wyatt straightened in the saddle despite the white-hot pain in his leg and urged Rust forward. The horse responded, bless him, pushing through drifts that reached his chest in places. The terrain began to rise as they entered the foothills, and Wyatt navigated more by feel than sight, trusting his knowledge of the land and Rust's instincts to keep them moving in the right direction. His hands had gone numb inside his gloves. His face felt like carved ice behind the scarf. The pain in his leg had become so constant and overwhelming that it almost stopped being pain and became simply part of the landscape of his existence, as much a feature of the world as the snow and wind. Then, through the white curtain ahead, he saw movement. Dark shapes huddled together in the lee of a rocky outcropping, a mass of bodies pressed close for warmth. His cattle. Relief flooded through him with such intensity that he felt dizzy. They were alive, or most of them at least. He could see the frost on their backs, the ice clinging to their faces, but they were standing, and that meant they were still fighting. Getting them moving would be the trick. Cattle were stubborn creatures at the best of times, and cold, frightened cattle could be near impossible to drive. Wyatt circled around them, Rust's hooves finding purchase on rocks hidden beneath the snow, and came at the herd from the north, trying to push them back south toward the ranch. The cattle lowed miserably but did not move. They had found shelter, such as it was, and their instinct was to stay put rather than venture back out into the killing wind. Wyatt shouted and waved his arms, but his voice was nothing against the storm. He managed to get a few of the animals on the edge of the herd moving, but the rest remained stubbornly in place, and within minutes the ones he had started southward had circled back to rejoin their fellows. His leg throbbed with each beat of his heart, and he was light-headed from pain and cold. This was not working. He needed help, needed another rider to work the far side of the herd, needed someone to help him break their stubborn determination to stay put and freeze. He considered riding back to the ranch to get Pete, but even as the thought formed, he dismissed it. By the time he made it back and returned with help, it would be full dark, and moving cattle in a nighttime blizzard was even more suicidal than what he was attempting now. No, it had to be now. Had to be him, even if it killed him. Wyatt was preparing to make another attempt, gathering what little remained of his strength, when he heard something that made him turn in the saddle despite the lance of pain the movement caused. A horse's whinny, high and clear, cutting through the wind. Then a shape emerged from the swirling white, a rider on a tall gray mare, moving with the kind of confidence that spoke of someone who knew exactly where they were and what they were doing. As the rider drew closer, Wyatt realized with shock that it was a woman. She sat her horse like she had been born in the saddle, her posture easy despite the storm, and as she pulled alongside him, he found himself staring into the most striking pair of green eyes he had ever seen. They were the color of spring grass, bright and alive in a face that was half hidden by a heavy scarf, and they studied him with an intensity that made him feel suddenly and acutely aware of how close to collapse he was. "You look half dead," she said, and her voice was clear and strong, pitched to carry over the wind. "What are you doing out here?" "My herd," Wyatt managed, his own voice coming out as a rasp. "Need to get them back to the ranch before they freeze." The green eyes flicked to his leg, taking in the way he held it stiffly, the way he listed in the saddle. Understanding dawned. "You are hurt." "I can manage." "Like hell you can. You can barely sit your horse." She looked past him to the huddled cattle, then back, and something shifted in her expression. A decision made. "I will help you bring them in." "Where is your ranch?" 3 miles south, maybe 4. Distances were hard to judge in the whiteout. "But who are you? Where did you come from?" "My name is Harper Thompson, and I have got a cabin about 2 miles west of here. I saw the storm coming in and was checking on my own stock when I spotted you wandering up here looking like death warmed over." She turned her mare without waiting for a response, moving to the far side of the herd. Get on the south side and push them toward me. I will turn them toward your ranch once they start moving. Wyatt wanted to argue, wanted to assert that he could handle his own cattle, that he did not need help from a strange woman who appeared out of blizzards like some kind of frontier angel. But his leg was a column of fire, his hands were numb, and he could feel his strength ebbing with every minute he sat in the saddle. Pride was a luxury he could not afford. He positioned Rust on the south side of the herd and started pushing again. And this time, with Harper working the opposite side, the cattle began to move. It was slow, difficult work. The animals were reluctant and confused, wanting to turn back to their shelter. But between the two riders, they managed to keep the herd moving generally south, down out of the foothills and onto the flatter ground where the wind was somehow even worse, but the drifts were not as deep. Wyatt lost track of time. The world narrowed to Rust's movements beneath him, the dark mass of cattle ahead, and Harper's gray mare appearing and disappearing through the snow as she worked the herd with a skill that spoke of years of experience. She rode like a ghost, like something the storm had conjured, and more than once Wyatt found himself wondering if he was hallucinating, if the cold had finally gotten to his brain, and he was imagining the help he so desperately needed. But then her voice would cut through the wind, sharp and sure, calling directions or warnings, and he would know she was real. Real and capable. And quite possibly saving his life along with his herd. His leg gave out completely about halfway to the ranch. One moment he was gripping the saddle with his thighs, the next his left leg was completely numb, a dead weight that no longer responded to his commands. He slumped forward over Rust's neck, his vision graying at the edges, and felt the horse slow and stop. Harper was beside him in seconds. Wyatt! Wyatt, stay with me. He realized he must have told her his name at some point, though he had no memory of it. Everything was getting fuzzy around the edges. Cannot feel my leg, he mumbled. Of course you cannot, you stubborn fool. It is probably frozen solid. Her gloved hand gripped his shoulder, shaking him hard enough to send fresh pain shooting through his body. And perversely, that helped clear his head a little. How much farther to your ranch? 2 miles, maybe less. He forced himself upright, forced his eyes to focus. I can make it. You had better, because I am not dragging your frozen corpse all the way there. But there was worry in her voice, under the sharpness, and her hand stayed on his shoulder, steadying him. Stay in the saddle. I will keep the herd moving. She did exactly that. For the next hour, as the light began to fail and the storm showed no sign of letting up, Harper Thompson drove Wyatt's cattle toward his ranch while he clung to consciousness and his saddle horn with equal desperation. Rust followed the herd on his own, needing no guidance, and that was fortunate because Wyatt was not sure he could have guided the horse if his life depended on it. When the dark shapes of the ranch buildings finally emerged from the white, Wyatt felt something loosen in his chest. They had made it. Against all odds, against all reasonable expectation, they had actually made it. The cattle smelled the shelter and warmth and started moving faster, no longer needing to be driven. And within minutes, they were flooding into the home paddock, where Pete had opened the gates and was waiting with feed and fresh water. Wyatt tried to dismount and nearly fell. His leg would not hold even a fraction of his weight, and he would have hit the ground hard if Pete had not caught him. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, the old foreman breathed. Boss, you are blue. We need to get you inside right now. The cattle, Wyatt managed, are fine. They are home, and they will be fine. Pete was already half carrying him toward the house, and Wyatt was too weak to protest. Over his shoulder, he could see Harper still mounted on her gray mare, watching. Even through his fading vision, he could see the worry in her eyes. Come inside, he called to her, his voice barely more than a whisper. Please, you saved my herd. Let me at least offer you shelter from the storm. She hesitated for just a moment, then swung down from her horse with fluid grace. Pete delegated her mare's care to one of the ranch hands who had appeared from the bunkhouse, and then she was following them into the ranch house, tracking snow across the wooden floors. The warmth hit Wyatt like a hammer. After hours in the killing cold, the heat from the fireplace felt almost painful, and he gasped as Pete lowered him into a chair near the hearth. His leg, as sensation began to return to it, went from numb to agonizing in the space of a heartbeat, and he could not entirely suppress the groan that escaped him. Harper had pulled down her scarf, and for the first time Wyatt saw her whole face. She was beautiful, he realized with a kind of distant surprise. Not in the delicate porcelain doll way that fashionable women back east affected, but in a way that was entirely suited to this harsh land. Her features were strong, her mouth wide and expressive, and those remarkable green eyes dominated her face. She looked to be perhaps 22 or 23, close to his own 26 years, and there was a competence in the way she moved that spoke of someone used to taking care of herself. "We need to check his leg," she said to Pete, all business. "Frostbite can set in fast, and if he has got it bad, he could lose the limb." "I will not lose my leg," Wyatt said, but even he could hear how weak his voice sounded. "Not if we take care of it properly, no." Harper knelt in front of him and began unlacing his boot. Her hands were steady despite the cold she must be feeling, and she worked with the efficiency of someone who knew what she was doing. "This is going to hurt." She was not lying. As she worked the boot off his swollen foot and began peeling away the layers of sock beneath, Wyatt had to grip the arms of the chair to keep from crying out. His leg below the knee was mottled white and blue, and when Harper carefully probed the skin with her fingers, testing for hard spots that would indicate serious frostbite, he nearly passed out from the pain. "It is not as bad as it could be," she announced after what felt like an eternity. "You have got some frost nip, and this knee is a mess, but I do not think you will lose anything important. You got lucky." "Does not feel lucky," Wyatt gasped. Lucky compared to the alternative. She stood and turned to Pete. "I need lukewarm water, not hot. Towels, and whiskey if you have it, both for drinking and for disinfecting. That knee looks like it has been injured before, and the cold has not done it any favors." Pete hurried to comply, and Harper turned her attention back to Wyatt. In the firelight, her hair, which had come loose from under her hat, glowed a deep auburn. "What did you do to that knee?" "Horse kicked me 2 years back. Shattered the joint. It healed, but not right." She nodded, unsurprised. "And you decided that limping through a blizzard to rescue cattle was a good idea? They are my livelihood, my future. I did not have a choice." Something in her expression softened, just a fraction. "I understand that. I have got my own spread, small as it is. I know what it means to have everything tied up in livestock and land." She accepted the basin of water and towels from Pete when he returned and set about carefully warming Wyatt's frozen leg. "But you cannot save your cattle if you are dead, and you came damn close today. Would have been closer if not for you." Wyatt looked at her directly, catching and holding her gaze. "Thank you. I mean that. You saved my herd and probably my life." Harper's cheeks colored slightly, and she looked back down at her work. "Anyone would have done the same." "That is not true, and we both know it. Most people would have ridden past, or not even been out in the storm in the first place. You came out of nowhere and helped a stranger for no reason except that he needed help." "That is not nothing." She did not respond, but Wyatt saw the corner of her mouth quirk up in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Pete returned with the whiskey, and Harper insisted Wyatt drink a generous measure before she started working on his knee. The alcohol burned going down, but spread a welcome warmth through his chest, and when she began manipulating the swollen joint, checking for new damage, the pain was a little more bearable. "I do not think you have broken anything new," she said finally, sitting back on her heels. "But this joint is a disaster. You should not have been riding on it at all, let alone through a blizzard." "I will keep that in mind for next time," Wyatt said dryly. This time she did smile, a real one that transformed her face and made his chest do something strange and tight. "See that you do." Pete cleared his throat. "Miss Thompson, you are welcome to stay the night." That storm is not letting up, and it would be foolish to try riding back to your cabin in the dark. Harper glanced at the window, where snow was still falling in thick sheets, then back at Wyatt. He could see her weighing options, calculating risks. I do not want to impose. It is not an imposition, Wyatt said quickly. We have got a spare room, and after what you did today, you are welcome to anything this house has to offer. Please, I would worry if you rode out into that. She studied him for a long moment, those green eyes seeming to see right through him, then nodded. All right, thank you. But just for tonight. I need to get back to my own place and check on my stock as soon as this clears. Pete showed her to the spare room while Wyatt remained by the fire, his leg propped up on a stool and throbbing with a dull, persistent ache that promised it would be worse before it got better. He could hear the murmur of voices from the other room, Harper thanking Pete for his hospitality, and then footsteps returning. She had taken off her heavy outer coat and appeared in the doorway, wearing a simple wool shirt and riding pants that would have scandalized proper Eastern society, but were eminently practical for life on the frontier. Your foreman is cooking dinner. Said to tell you it will be ready in 20 minutes. Pete is a good man. Been with me since I bought this place. Wyatt gestured to the chair opposite him. Sit, please. You must be as tired as I am. Harper settled into the chair with a small sigh of relief that told him she was indeed exhausted, even if she hid it well. For a few minutes they sat in companionable silence, listening to the wind howl outside and the fire crackle in the hearth. The warmth and the whiskey and the simple relief of being alive and safe were combining to make Wyatt feel almost drunk. How long have you had your spread? He asked, curious about this woman who had appeared out of the storm like an answer to a prayer he had not quite articulated. 3 years? I bought 40 acres west of here with money I saved working as a cook in a hotel in Carson City. It is not much, just a cabin and a small barn. But it is mine. There was fierce pride in her voice. I run about 30 head of cattle and a dozen horses. I make enough to get by. That is more than a lot of people can say. Getting by is not nothing out here. Wyatt shifted his leg, trying to find a position that hurt less, and failed. Do you run the place alone? I have got a hired hand who helps with the heavy work, an older Mexican fellow named Esteban. Good man, knows cattle. Otherwise, yes, it is just me. That is hard work for anyone, let alone running it alone. Harper's expression hardened slightly. I did not ask for it to be easy. I asked for it to be mine. I did not mean any offense, Wyatt said quickly. I was just observing. I think it is impressive. Truth be told, a lot of men could not do what you are doing. The hardness faded from her eyes. Sorry, I am used to people, especially men, assuming I do not know what I am doing or that I need someone to take care of me. It gets tiresome. I imagine it does. For what it is worth, after watching you work today, I have no doubts about your capabilities. You handle cattle better than most men I know, myself included. This earned him another one of those smiles that did strange things to his pulse. You were doing all right until your leg gave out? Those cattle are lucky to have someone willing to nearly kill himself to save them. They are just business, Wyatt said, but even he did not entirely believe it. The cattle were more than business. They were his future, his chance at building something lasting in this unforgiving land. Harper seemed to sense his thoughts. They are never just business, not when they represent everything you have worked for. I understand that. She leaned forward slightly, her expression serious. But you need to take care of yourself too, Wyatt. You will not have much of a future if you kill yourself trying to save it. I will keep that in mind. He met her gaze, and something passed between them, some current of understanding and mutual respect that went deeper than words. Thank you again for everything. You already thanked me. No need to keep doing it. I think there is every need. You did not have to help me, and you did. That means something. Before Harper could respond, Pete called from the kitchen that dinner was ready, and the moment passed. They ate together at the rough wooden table, simple food that tasted like the finest meal Wyatt had ever eaten, simply because he was warm and safe and alive to taste it. Harper ate with good appetite, and she and Pete traded stories about the challenges of ranching in Nevada, while Wyatt listened and occasionally contributed, content to let the conversation flow around him. After dinner, Harper helped Pete clean up, despite both men insisting she should rest, and then exhaustion finally caught up with all of them. Pete headed to his own quarters in the back of the house, and Harper retreated to the spare room after extracting a promise from Wyatt that he would elevate his leg and not try to do anything stupid during the night. Wyatt made his way to his own room, limping heavily and using the walls for support. Getting into bed was an exercise in controlled agony, but once he was horizontal with his leg propped on pillows, the pain subsided to a dull roar. He lay in the darkness, listening to the storm rage outside, and thought about green eyes and auburn hair and the way Harper Thompson had looked at him like he was worth saving. He had not thought about a woman in that way for a long time. Building the ranch had consumed all his energy and attention for the past 5 years, and there had simply been no room in his life for romance or anything like it. There were women in Pahrump, the town 10 miles south where he bought his supplies, but none of them had ever caught his interest the way Harper had in the space of a few hours. It was ridiculous, he told himself. He had just met her. She had helped him in a crisis, and he was confusing gratitude with attraction. By morning, once the storm had passed, and she rode back to her own place, he would likely never see her again. The thought should not have bothered him as much as it did. Sleep came eventually, deep and dreamless, the sleep of utter exhaustion. When Wyatt woke, gray morning light was filtering through the window, and the wind had finally died. He could hear movement in the house, voices in the kitchen, and smell coffee brewing. His leg hurt, but it was a more manageable pain than the night before, and when he carefully tested his weight on it, it held, barely. He dressed slowly, awkwardly, and limped out to the kitchen to find Harper and Pete already up and deep in conversation. Harper had changed clothes, borrowing what looked like an old shirt of Pete's, and her hair was pulled back in a practical braid. She looked up when Wyatt entered and gave him a quick, appraising look. "How is the leg?" "Better. Still hurts, but better." He accepted the cup of coffee Pete handed him and took a grateful sip. "Storm passed?" "About an hour before dawn," Pete said. "I have already been out to check the cattle. We lost 3 head, but the rest are fine. All things considered, it could have been a lot worse." 3 cattle. It stung, but Pete was right. It could have been catastrophic. Without Harper's help, it would have been. "I will ride out and check the rest of the property later." "You will do no such thing," Harper said firmly. "You can barely walk. You need to stay off that leg for at least a few days. I cannot just sit around while there is work to be done." "You can, and you will, unless you want to do permanent damage." She set down her own coffee cup with a decisive clink. "Pete can handle things here. You have got ranch hands, you have got a foreman. Let them do their jobs." Wyatt wanted to argue, but the look on her face told him it would be a losing battle. Besides, she was probably right. The leg felt fragile, like it might give out again if he pushed it too hard too soon. Harper must have seen the resignation on his face because she nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now I need to get back to my own place. Esteban will be worried, and I need to make sure my herd weathered the storm all right." "Let me send one of my hands with you," Wyatt said, "just to make sure you get back safely." "I appreciate the offer, but I will be fine. I know this land like the back of my hand, and the weather has cleared." She stood, collecting her coat and hat from where they had been drying by the fire. "You take care of that leg, Wyatt Morgan. I do not want to hear that you have done something stupid and made it worse." "I will be careful," he promised. Then, before he could talk himself out of it, he added, "Come back and visit once your stock is settled. I would like to repay your kindness properly. Maybe dinner when I am not half dead from cold." Harper paused in the act of pulling on her gloves, and something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or pleasure. "I might do that." if you are lucky. I think I have used up all my luck for a while. Maybe not all of it." She smiled, and then she was gone, striding out into the cold morning with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she belonged in the world. Wyatt stood at the window and watched her ride away on her gray mare until she disappeared over a rise, and found himself already counting the days until she might return. The next week was an exercise in frustration. Wyatt's leg, pushed beyond its limits during the storm, refused to cooperate with his desire to get back to work. Any time he put weight on it for more than a few minutes, it swelled and throbbed until he had no choice but to sit down and elevate it. Pete ran the ranch with his usual efficiency, and the cattle recovered from their ordeal with the resilience that made them valuable in such a harsh climate. But Wyatt chafed at his enforced idleness. He found himself thinking about Harper Thompson far more than was probably reasonable. In his mind, he replayed their conversations, the way she had handled his cattle with such skill, the fierce independence in her voice when she talked about her own spread. He wondered if she was thinking about him too, or if he had been just another stranger she had helped in passing, already forgotten in the press of her own concerns. 10 days after the storm, he woke to find his leg feeling genuinely better for the first time. The swelling had gone down, and when he tested his weight on it, there was pain, but not the sharp, urgent kind that warned of damage. Pete took one look at his face and sighed. "You are going to ride out today, are not you?" "I am going to check the north fence line," Wyatt confirmed. "The snow might have brought down some posts, and I need to see what needs repairing before we move the cattle back up there in spring." "At least take someone with you." "I will take Billy." Billy was the youngest of his ranch hands, a good kid with a solid head on his shoulders. "We will be back before dark." They rode out mid-morning, and the work was exactly what Wyatt needed. The physical activity, the cold air, the satisfaction of spotting problems and planning solutions. His leg held up better than he had dared hope, and by the time he and Billy turned back toward the ranch in the late afternoon, he was feeling more like himself than he had in weeks. They were about a mile from home when Billy pointed ahead. "Someone coming?" Wyatt looked and felt his heart kick unexpectedly in his chest. Even at a distance, he recognized the gray mare and the confident way the rider sat her saddle. Harper was coming back, just as she had said she might. He touched his heels to Russ's flanks, urging the horse into a trot despite the protest from his leg, and met her halfway. She pulled up alongside him, and God help him, she was even prettier than he remembered. The cold had brought color to her cheeks, and her eyes were bright in the afternoon light. "You are not sitting around with your leg up," she observed. "It is better. Almost back to normal, or what passes for normal with this knee." "Good. I was worried you might have done something stupid." She glanced past him at Billy, who was pretending not to eavesdrop, then back. "You said something about dinner?" "I did. Tonight, if you are willing to stay. Pete is a better cook than me, but I can at least promise the company will be decent." "I will hold you to that." Harper smiled, and something warm unfurled in Wyatt's chest. "Lead the way, then." Dinner that night was a lively affair. Pete outdid himself with a roast and potatoes, and Harper regaled them with stories from her own experiences ranching alone, tales that were by turns funny and harrowing, and always engaging. Wyatt found himself laughing more than he had in months, found himself watching the way candlelight played across Harper's face, the way her hands moved when she talked, the way her whole being seemed to radiate life and energy. After dinner, they sat by the fire while Pete tactfully made himself scarce, and the conversation turned more personal. "Why Nevada?" Wyatt asked. "You said you saved your money in Carson City. You could have gone anywhere. Why here?" Harper was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. "I wanted space. Freedom. Back east, where I grew up, there were too many rules about what a woman could and could not do. Too many people telling me I needed to find a husband and settle down and be respectable." She looked at him, her expression fierce. "I did not want that life. I wanted to build something of my own, be my own person, The West offered that, even if it meant doing it the hard way. You left your family. My parents died when I was 16. Fever. After that, I lived with my aunt in Philadelphia for a while, but she and I did not see eye to eye on much of anything. When I turned 18, I left, worked my way west, saved every penny I could, and eventually ended up here. She smiled, but there was old pain behind it. I do not regret it. This life is hard, but it is mine. That is worth more than all the respectability in the world. I understand that, Wyatt said quietly. I left Missouri for similar reasons. My father wanted me to take over his dry goods store, live the life he had planned for me. But I wanted more, wanted land and cattle and the chance to build something that would last. He did not understand, and we parted on bad terms. I have not spoken to him in 5 years. Do you regret that? Some days. Most days, no. He made his choice, and I made mine. Wyatt shifted his leg, which was starting to ache from sitting too long in one position. But I think about him sometimes. Wonder if he thinks about me. Harper reached over, and without fanfare, put her hand on his arm. The touch was light, brief, but it sent electricity through him. For what it is worth, I think you made the right choice. This life suits you. It suits you too. You are good at it, Harper. Better than most people I have met out here. She ducked her head, looking pleased and embarrassed in equal measure. Well, we do what we have to do, right? Right. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic, and when Harper finally announced she should head back to her cabin before it got too late, Wyatt walked her out to the stable where her mare had been settled. The night was cold and clear, stars blazing overhead in the way they only did in the high desert. Come back soon, Wyatt said as Harper swung up into her saddle. Please, I would like to see you again. Harper looked down at him, and in the moonlight her expression was unreadable. Then she smiled. I would like that too. I will be back this way in a few days to check on some strays that have been wandering near the boundary of our properties. Maybe I will stop by. I will look forward to it. She rode off into the darkness, and Wyatt stood in the cold until the sound of her horse's hooves faded to nothing, already counting the hours until she would return. The visits became regular after that. Harper would ride over every few days, sometimes with a stated purpose like checking fences or tracking strays, sometimes with no excuse at all. They would work together when there was work to be done, or simply sit and talk when there was not. Wyatt found himself looking forward to those visits with an intensity that surprised him, found himself going about his daily tasks with one eye always on the horizon, watching for the sight of a gray mare and its capable rider. Pete noticed, of course. You are sweet on her, he said one morning as they watched Harper drive a group of her cattle back toward her own property. Is it that obvious? Only to anyone with eyes. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Wyatt had been asking himself the same thing. His feelings for Harper had grown from respect and gratitude into something deeper, something that made his chest tight and his thoughts scattered whenever she was near. But he had no idea if she felt the same way, and the thought of ruining their friendship by declaring feelings that might not be reciprocated terrified him in a way that facing a blizzard had not. I do not know, he admitted. What if I am wrong? What if she is just being friendly and I am reading too much into it? Pete snorted. Boy, I have been alive twice as long as you, and I know what a woman looks like when she is interested. Harper Thompson rides 3 miles out of her way just to see you. She stays for dinner 3 times a week. She smiles every time you walk into a room. If that is not interest, I will eat my hat. You really think so? I know so. The question is whether you are brave enough to do something about it. Wyatt thought about that for the rest of the day. That evening, when Harper arrived for another one of her increasingly frequent visits, he asked if she would take a walk with him after dinner. She agreed easily, and after the meal, they bundled up against the cold and walked out to where the land rose slightly, offering a view of the valley spread out below them under the stars. I have been thinking, Wyatt said, and then stopped, unsure how to continue. Dangerous pastime, Harper teased, but her tone was gentle. I have been thinking about you, about us. He took a breath, his heart hammering. Harper, these past few weeks with you have been some of the best I have had since coming to Nevada. You are smart and capable and funny, and I look forward to seeing you every single day. I do not want to ruin our friendship, but I would be lying if I said I did not want more than friendship. Harper was quiet for a long moment, and Wyatt's stomach sank. He had misjudged, had pushed too far too fast, and now he was going to lose even what he had. Then she turned to face him fully, and in the moonlight he could see that she was smiling. You are an idiot, Wyatt Morgan. I am? That was not the response he had been expecting. Yes, because I have been waiting for you to say something like that for 2 weeks now. I thought I was going to have to hit you over the head with it. Relief and joy flooded through him in equal measure. You mean you feel the same way? Of course I do. Why do you think I have been riding over here every other day? It is not because I enjoy the journey that much. She reached up and cupped his face with her gloved hand, her touch gentle. I like you, Wyatt. More than like you. You are kind and hardworking, and you do not treat me like I am less capable just because I am a woman. That means more to me than I can say. Wyatt covered her hand with his own, hardly daring to believe this was happening. Can I kiss you? I will be very disappointed if you do not. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, but she met him halfway. Their lips touched, cold at first from the night air but warming quickly, and Wyatt felt something settle into place deep in his chest, something he had not even realized was missing until this moment. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they finally pulled apart, Harper was grinning. Well, that was worth the wait. Was it? Absolutely. She laced her fingers through his, still smiling. So what happens now? I would like to court you properly, if you will let me. I want to do this right. I think I would like that. Though I should warn you, I am not interested in giving up my ranch or my independence. If we do this, we do it as equals, or not at all. I would not want it any other way, Wyatt said, and meant it with his whole heart. Your ranch is part of who you are. I would never ask you to give that up. Good. Then we understand each other. Harper squeezed his hand. This is going to be interesting, Wyatt Morgan. You realize that? I am counting on it. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and when Harper finally mounted her mare to ride home, Wyatt kissed her again, longer this time, pouring into it all the feelings he had been holding back. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were bright and her cheeks flushed. I will see you tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, Wyatt agreed, and watched her ride off with a lightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the cold night air. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Wyatt had experienced or even heard about. There were no formal parlor visits or chaperoned outings, no adherence to the rigid social conventions that governed such things back east. Instead, their relationship grew out of shared work and shared challenges, out of days spent riding fence lines together and evenings spent planning how to improve their respective herds. They helped each other with difficult tasks, learned each other's habits and preferences, discovered the ways they fit together and the ways they had to compromise. It was not always easy. Harper was fiercely independent and used to making all her own decisions, and there were times when Wyatt's protective instincts clashed with her determination to handle things herself. But they learned to navigate those rough patches, learned to communicate and trust, and give each other space when it was needed. Spring came to Nevada in a riot of wildflowers and new grass, and Wyatt's cattle moved back up into the high pastures, healthy and productive. Harper's herd grew as well, and they talked about pooling resources, about ways they could help each other be more successful without either of them giving up their independence. One evening in May, as they sat on the porch of Wyatt's ranch house watching the sun set over the mountains, Wyatt turned to Harper and took her hand. Marry me. She looked at him, eyes wide. What? Marry me. I know it has only been a few months, but I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, Harper. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you face down every challenge without blinking. I want to build a life with you side by side as partners in every sense of the word. Harper's eyes were suspiciously bright. You are serious. Completely. I know it will not be a traditional marriage. I know you will want to keep your ranch running, and I would never ask you to give that up. We can figure out the details together. But I want you in my life, permanently, if you will have me. Yes. The word came out as barely more than a whisper, but then she repeated it, stronger. Yes, Wyatt Morgan, I will marry you. On one condition. Anything. We build something new together. Not just your ranch or mine, but something that belongs to both of us. A real partnership. Can you agree to that? I can not only agree to it, I want it. We are stronger together than we are apart. I have seen that every single day since the storm. He pulled her close, kissing her deeply. We will figure out all the details. We will make it work. I promise you that. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Pahrump, with Pete as one witness and Esteban as the other. Harper wore a simple dress she had sewn herself, and Wyatt wore his best suit, which he had not put on since leaving Missouri. The ceremony was brief, the vows heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Wyatt felt like his life had finally clicked into place. The practical reality of combining their lives and their ranches took time and effort to work out. They decided that Harper's cabin was too small for both of them, so she moved into Wyatt's ranch house, while Esteban took over day-to-day management of her property, with the understanding that the profits would remain hers. They worked both spreads together, hiring additional help when they needed it, and slowly built something that was bigger and more successful than either of them could have managed alone. It was hard work, made harder by the fact that they were pioneering a kind of marriage that was virtually unheard of in their time and place. People in Pahrump gossiped about the arrangement, about a wife who worked cattle alongside her husband instead of staying home and keeping house. But Harper and Wyatt ignored the talk, secure in the knowledge that they had built something real and lasting on their own terms. Their first summer together was a season of discovery and adjustment. They learned each other's rhythms, figured out how to divide labor and make decisions jointly, navigated the inevitable conflicts that arose when two strong-willed people tried to build a life together. But through it all, the love that had brought them together only grew stronger. In the fall, Harper discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. They were going to be parents, going to bring a new life into their harsh but beautiful corner of the world. Harper continued working for as long as she could, insisting she was not fragile just because she was expecting, and Wyatt learned to balance his protective instincts with respect for her autonomy. Their son was born in March of 1886, during another late-season snowstorm that reminded them both of the night they had met. The labor was long and difficult, attended by the doctor from Pahrump and by Pete's wife Martha, who had nursing experience. Wyatt paced the hallway outside their bedroom for hours, his bad leg throbbing in time with his racing heart, until finally he heard the thin, wavering cry of a newborn. When Martha opened the door and gestured him in, he limped into the room to find Harper exhausted but smiling, cradling a tiny red-faced infant against her chest. "Meet your son," she said softly. Wyatt approached carefully, hardly daring to breathe, and looked down at the baby. He was perfect, tiny, and vulnerable, and absolutely perfect. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking William after your father. Maybe it is time to mend that fence." Wyatt felt his throat tighten. He had not spoken to his father in 6 years, had not even written to tell him about the marriage or the coming baby. "You would do that? Name our son after a man who was too stubborn to forgive his own child?" I would do it because forgiveness has to start somewhere, and because I think you still love your father even if you are angry at him. Besides, William is a good, strong name. She looked up at Wyatt, her eyes full of understanding. Write to him, Wyatt. Tell him he has a grandson. Life is too short for estrangement. I will. I promise. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, then very gently touched one finger to the baby's tiny hand. William's fingers closed around it reflexively, and Wyatt felt his heart turn over in his chest. Thank you for everything. For him, for this life, for being who you are. Right back at you. Harper smiled, tired but content. We make a good team, you and I. The best. True to his word, Wyatt wrote to his father that week. The letter was difficult to compose, full of things left unsaid for too long, but he poured his heart into it. He told his father about the ranch, about Harper, about the grandson who bore his name. He said he would understand if his father did not want to respond, but that he wanted him to know the door was always open if he chose to walk through it. 3 months later, a letter arrived from Missouri. Wyatt's hand shook as he opened it, Harper standing beside him with baby William in her arms. The letter was stiff and formal at first, his father's pride still evident in every line, but as it went on, it softened. He congratulated them on the marriage and the birth. He said he had been a fool to let pride come between them. He said he would like to meet his grandson if they would welcome a visit. Wyatt looked at Harper, hardly daring to believe it. He wants to visit. Then tell him to come. We have room, and William should know his grandfather. She shifted the baby to one arm and put her free hand on Wyatt's shoulder. This is good, Wyatt. This is healing. Wyatt's father arrived in July, traveling by train and then stagecoach to reach their isolated corner of Nevada. The reunion was awkward at first, 6 years of silence and hurt feelings standing between them like a wall. But William, with the oblivious charm of infancy, broke through that wall. The moment Wyatt placed his son in his father's arms, something shifted. The old man's face crumpled, and tears ran down his weathered cheeks. He looks like you did at this age, he said, his voice thick, exactly like you. I hope he has an easier time with his father than I did with mine, Wyatt said, but gently, without rancor. His father looked up, meeting his eyes. I was wrong. I should have supported your dreams instead of trying to force my own on you. I have regretted it every day since you left. I was stubborn too. I could have tried harder to make you understand instead of just leaving. We were both fools, but maybe we can do better going forward. He looked down at William again, then at Harper, who had been watching the exchange with quiet satisfaction. You have built something good here. A good life, a good family. I am proud of you, son. I should have said that years ago. Those words, so long in coming, healed something in Wyatt that he had not even realized was broken. They spent 2 weeks together, grandfather and father and grandson, rebuilding the relationship that had been fractured for too long. By the time Wyatt's father left to return to Missouri, the breach between them had been mended, and they parted with promises to write regularly and visit when they could. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, aided by favorable weather and good management, and the fact that Wyatt and Harper worked together so well. They expanded their herd, bought additional land, hired more help as needed. William grew into a bright, energetic toddler who loved horses and cattle and following his parents around as they worked. 2 years after William's birth, Harper gave them a daughter. They named her Catherine, and she had her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn determination. The house that had once felt too large for just Wyatt now rang with the sounds of children, and he could not imagine how he had ever lived in such silence. Life was not without its challenges. There were droughts and market downturns, injuries and illnesses, all the thousand difficulties that came with living in such an unforgiving place. But they faced each challenge together, and that made all the difference. One winter evening, when William was 5 and Catherine 3, the family gathered around the fireplace after dinner. Snow was falling outside, reminding Wyatt of that long-ago storm that had brought Harper into his life. The children were playing with wooden animals Pete had carved for them, and Harper sat beside him on the sofa, her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" Wyatt asked softly. "Giving up your own place to join your life with mine?" Harper lifted her head and looked at him, eyebrows raised. "I did not give up anything. I traded one good thing for something better. This ranch is as much mine as it is yours, Wyatt. We built this together. I know, but sometimes I worry that you miss having your own place, being completely independent." "I am independent. I make decisions, I work the land, I contribute equally to everything we do. The only difference is now I have a partner in all of it, and children who fill my days with joy. Why would I regret that?" She cupped his face with her hand, her touch gentle. "You gave me everything I ever wanted, Wyatt Morgan. A life on my own terms, a partnership built on respect and love, a family. I have never been happier. Neither have I." He kissed her, long and sweet, and felt the same rush of love and contentment he had felt the day they married. "I love you. I love you too. Always." Little William looked up from his toys. "Papa, tell us the story about the big storm again." It had become a favorite tale, the story of how his parents had met. Wyatt settled back, pulling Harper close, and began to speak. "It was the worst blizzard I had ever seen, and our cattle were freezing up in the high pasture. I knew I had to save them, even though my leg was hurt and I could barely walk." The children listened with rapt attention as he told the familiar story, how he had limped through the snow to save his frozen herd, how their mother had ridden out and helped him bring them in, how that single act of kindness had changed both their lives forever. Catherine's eyes grew heavy as the tale went on, and by the time Wyatt reached the end, she was asleep against her mother's side. "The moral of the story," Harper said, smiling at William, "is that sometimes help comes from unexpected places, and sometimes the best thing we can do is accept that help with grace. And sometimes," Wyatt added, "the person who saves your cattle ends up saving everything else too." They put the children to bed together, a nightly ritual that never failed to fill Wyatt with quiet joy. After the kids were settled, he and Harper stood at the window of their bedroom, looking out at the falling snow. "Do you think about that night often?" Harper asked. "More than you might expect. If that storm had not come, if I had not been desperate enough to risk myself for those cattle, if you had not been checking your own stock at exactly the right time." He shook his head. "So many things had to align perfectly for us to find each other. Or maybe we were always meant to find each other, and the storm was just the universe giving us a push in the right direction." Harper leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her waist, holding her close. "Either way, I am grateful for it. For you, for all of this. As am I." They stood there for a long time, watching the snow fall and the stars emerge between the clouds, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed: partners, lovers, best friends, parents. They had built a life on the harsh Nevada land, a life full of hard work and harder choices, but also full of love and laughter, and the kind of deep satisfaction that came from creating something meaningful with your own hands. The ranch continued to prosper over the following years. By 1895, the Morgan spread was one of the largest and most successful in the region, known for quality cattle and fair dealings. Wyatt's leg never fully healed, and he still limped, especially in cold weather, but it became just another part of who he was, a reminder of the night that had changed everything. William grew into a thoughtful, capable young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. Catherine proved to have her mother's gift with horses and her father's head for business. In 1890, Harper gave birth to another son, whom they named Peter, after the foreman who had become family. Pete himself, now well into his 60s, doted on his namesake and continued to run the day-to-day operations of the ranch with the same efficiency he always had. Wyatt's father visited every summer, and the relationship that had been so fractured was now one of mutual respect and genuine affection. He got to know his grandchildren, to see the life his son had built, and he told anyone who would listen that he had been a fool to doubt Wyatt's choices. In the spring of 1898, tragedy struck when Pete suffered a heart attack while working in the south pasture. He died before the doctor could be summoned, and his loss hit the entire ranch like a blow. Pete had been more than an employee, more than a foreman. He had been family, and his absence left a hole that could not be filled. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the land he had helped build and protect. The whole town of Pahrump turned out for the funeral, testament to the respect Pete had commanded. Wyatt spoke at the service, his voice breaking as he talked about the man who had been a mentor and a friend, who had seen him through the worst days and celebrated the best ones. "He was there the night I nearly died trying to save my cattle," Wyatt said, looking out at the assembled mourners. "He was there when I married Harper, when our children were born, through every crisis and every triumph. He was the foundation this ranch was built on, and we will honor his memory by continuing the work he started." Afterwards, as the crowd dispersed and the family stood alone by the fresh grave, Harper took Wyatt's hand. "He lived a good life. He knew he was valued and loved. That is more than most people get. I know. It doesn't make it easier, but I know." Wyatt looked out at the ranch spread below them, at the cattle grazing peacefully, and the buildings standing solid against the Nevada sky. "We will make sure his legacy continues, that this place he helped build keeps thriving." "We will," Harper agreed. "That is what he would have wanted." They promoted Billy, who was no longer the young kid Wyatt had hired years ago, but a capable man in his own right, to the position of foreman. Billy took to the responsibility with a seriousness that would have made Pete proud, and the ranch continued to run smoothly despite the loss. As the new century approached, Wyatt and Harper found themselves entering middle age with a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. They had built not just a successful ranch, but a family, a community, a legacy. William, now a young man of nearly 15, was starting to take on real responsibility in the operation. Catherine, at 12, could ride and rope as well as any hand on the place. Young Peter, at 8, showed signs of having inherited the best traits of both his parents. On New Year's Eve of 1899, as the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the family gathered around the table for a special dinner. Wyatt looked at his wife, at his children, at the home they had created, and felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. "I want to make a toast," he said, raising his glass, "to family, to the past that brought us here, and the future we are building together, to the woman who rode out of a blizzard and changed my life forever." Harper's eyes glistened as she raised her own glass. "And to the man who was stubborn enough to limp through snow to save what mattered to him. May we always have that kind of determination." They clinked glasses, and the children joined in with their cups of cider, and outside the window the Nevada night was clear and cold and full of stars. The early years of the new century brought new challenges and new opportunities. The West was changing, becoming more civilized and connected. Railroads reached areas that had been isolated, bringing new markets and new competition. Wyatt and Harper adapted as they always had, finding ways to take advantage of the changing landscape while staying true to the principles that had guided them from the beginning. In 1903, William announced his intention to marry a young woman he had met in Pahrump, the daughter of the general store owner. Her name was Sarah, and she was smart and kind and clearly loved William with her whole heart. Wyatt gave his blessing gladly, and Harper helped plan a wedding that brought together ranchers and townspeople from 50 miles around. Standing in the church and watching his son exchange vows, Wyatt felt the weight of time passing. It seemed impossible that the tiny infant he had held in his arms was now a man starting his own family. But beneath the bittersweet awareness of time's passage was a deep satisfaction. William was happy and capable, and ready for whatever life threw at him. That was all a father could ask. Harper squeezed his hand as they watched, and Wyatt knew she was feeling the same mixture of emotions. "We did all right with him," she whispered. "We did better than all right. We did great." William and Sarah built a house on the eastern edge of the ranch, and within a year they welcomed Wyatt and Harper's first grandchild, a daughter named Emma. Holding that tiny baby, Wyatt was struck by the continuity of it all, the way life moved forward in an endless cycle of birth and growth and renewal. Catherine, always more independent than her older brother, announced at 16 that she wanted to train horses professionally. She had a gift for it, a patience and understanding that allowed her to gentle even the most difficult animals. Wyatt and Harper supported her dream, helping her set up a training operation that quickly gained a reputation throughout the region. By 1907, people were bringing horses from as far away as California for Catherine to work with. Young Peter, the surprise late addition to the family, grew into a boy with his father's intensity and his mother's practical nature. He loved the ranch with a passion that matched or exceeded his parents', and by the time he was 12, he was already talking about innovations and improvements, about new breeds of cattle and better water management techniques. Wyatt listened to his youngest son's enthusiastic plans and saw the future of the ranch taking shape. As the decade progressed, Wyatt found himself gradually stepping back from the day-to-day management of the ranch. His leg, which had never fully healed, was getting worse with age, and there were days when walking was genuinely difficult. He hated the weakness, hated being limited, but Harper reminded him gently that there was no shame in accepting help and delegating responsibility. "You built this place," she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "You have earned the right to slow down a little. I feel like I am giving up." "You are not giving up. You are passing the torch. William is ready to take on more responsibility. Catherine has her own successful operation. Peter is learning fast. They can handle it, Wyatt. And you can still be involved, still make the big decisions. You are just not killing yourself with the physical labor anymore." He knew she was right, but it was still hard to accept. He had built his identity around being a rancher, around working the land with his own hands. Stepping back felt like losing part of himself. But as time went on, he found unexpected joys in the new arrangement. He had time to spend with his grandchildren, to teach them about the land and the cattle and the values that had guided him. He had time to sit with Harper on quiet evenings and simply enjoy her company, without the constant press of work demanding their attention. He had time to read and think and plan for the future in ways he never had when every moment was consumed with immediate needs. In 1910, Wyatt's father passed away peacefully in his sleep in Missouri. The news hit hard, even though they had known it was coming. The old man had been in declining health for years, and he was past 80. Still, Wyatt grieved for the father he had been estranged from for so long, grateful that they had managed to reconcile and rebuild their relationship before it was too late. He and Harper traveled to Missouri for the funeral, their first time leaving the ranch together in years. Standing in the cemetery where his mother was also buried, Wyatt said goodbye to his father with a heart that was sad but at peace. They had made their peace years ago, had built something new from the ruins of their broken relationship, and that was a gift beyond measure. "I am glad you wrote that letter," Harper said, as they stood by the grave after the service. "Glad you gave him a chance to be part of our lives and the children's lives." "So am I. It was one of the best decisions I ever made." Wyatt looked at her, this woman who had been his partner and his anchor for 25 years. "You always know exactly what I need even before I know it myself." That is what 25 years of marriage does. We know each other inside and out. She leaned against him and he put his arm around her shoulders. "Come on, let us go home. Nevada is calling." They returned to the ranch renewed, ready for whatever the next chapter of their lives would bring. William had handled everything perfectly in their absence, proving once and for all that he was fully capable of running the operation. Wyatt officially made him a partner in the ranch, giving him equal say in all major decisions, and felt nothing but pride at how his son rose to the challenge. The years of the 1910s brought prosperity and growth. The ranch continued to expand, and the Morgan name became synonymous with quality cattle throughout the West. Catherine's horse training operation flourished, and she married a fellow horse trainer in 1913, a good man who treated her as an equal partner. Peter, showing the same determination his father had at that age, started his own small herd with money he saved from working the ranch, building toward his own future. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with noise and laughter. Emma was joined by siblings and cousins, a whole new generation growing up on the land their grandparents had built. Wyatt taught them to ride and rope, told them stories about the old days, passed on the knowledge and values that had been passed to him. Harper, now in her 50s, remained as capable and independent as ever. Her hair had threads of silver running through the auburn, and there were lines around her eyes from years of squinting into the Nevada sun, but to Wyatt she was as beautiful as she had been the night she rode out of the blizzard to save him. She still worked cattle when the mood struck her, still rode her fence lines, still made sure the ranch ran to her exacting standards. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1916, Wyatt surprised her with a gift he had been planning for months. He had hired a craftsman to build a carved wooden sign, 6 feet long and beautifully detailed, that read, "Morgan Ranch founded 1880, built on love and determination." They hung it over the gate leading to the main house, and Harper cried when she saw it, which was so rare that it made Wyatt tear up too. "It is perfect," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It says exactly what this place is." "You made it that," Wyatt said. "You and me together. We built this on love and determination, and that is what will keep it going long after we are gone." That evening, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, they celebrated not just their anniversary, but everything they had built together. William stood to make a toast, his own children clustered around him. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet room, "you showed us what a real partnership looks like. You built this ranch through hard work and harder choices, through droughts and storms and all the challenges this land could throw at you. But more than that, you built a family. You taught us to value each other, to work together, to face challenges with courage and determination. Everything good in my life I owe to you both." Catherine stood next, her own glass raised. "You taught me that being a woman does not mean accepting limits. Mama, you showed me that I could do anything I set my mind to, that I did not have to choose between being capable and being loved. Papa, you supported every dream I ever had, never once suggested I should want less just because of my gender. Thank you for that gift." Even young Peter, just 16 but already well-spoken, added his voice. "I am proud to carry on what you started. This ranch, this legacy, it means everything to me. I promise I will honor it and protect it and pass it on to my own children someday." Wyatt looked around the table at his family, at the life he and Harper had built, and felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. This was what mattered, not the size of the ranch or the number of cattle or any measure of material success. This, the people gathered around him, the love that bound them together, the legacy that would outlast his own life. This was everything. As the decade moved toward its end, the world beyond their Nevada ranch grew increasingly complex. War raged in Europe, and though it seemed far away, it touched them when 2 of the ranch hands enlisted and went off to fight. Wyatt followed the news in the papers that arrived weekly from Pahrump, worried about the young men who had worked his land and become part of his extended family. When they both returned safely in 1919, he threw a party that lasted 2 days. The 1920s brought more changes. The automobile, which had been a curiosity, became increasingly common. Roads improved, and the isolation that had once characterized life in rural Nevada began to ease. Wyatt bought a truck for the ranch, though he was never entirely comfortable with the noisy machine and often preferred his horse for getting around the property. Harper adapted more easily, as she always had, seeing the truck as simply another tool to make their work more efficient. She learned to drive it before Wyatt did, and he often teased her about being more modern than him. Someone has to keep us from becoming complete fossils, she would shoot back. But there was no heat in it, just the comfortable banter of a couple who had been together so long they could read each other's thoughts. In 1925, Wyatt turned 60. The milestone hit him harder than he expected, a stark reminder of his own mortality. He was an old man now by the standards of the time, and his body reminded him of that fact daily. The leg that had never healed right ached constantly, and there were mornings when he could barely get out of bed. But he refused to give in to it, refused to become an invalid waiting for death. Harper, turning 58 that same year, remained stubbornly vigorous. She might move a bit slower than she once had, might take longer to recover from a long day's work, but she was still capable of everything she had always done. Watching her, Wyatt drew strength and determination. If she was not giving up, then neither would he. That fall, they took a trip to San Francisco, something they had talked about for years but never quite gotten around to doing. They left the ranch in William's capable hands and boarded a train, embarking on an adventure that felt both exciting and slightly terrifying to two people who had spent most of their lives in rural Nevada. The city was overwhelming at first, all noise and crowds and buildings taller than anything they had ever seen. But it was also exhilarating. They ate at restaurants where other people did the cooking, saw motion pictures in proper theaters, walked along the waterfront, and marveled at the ships from all over the world. One evening, standing on a hill overlooking the bay as the sun set in a glory of orange and gold, Harper turned to Wyatt and smiled. "This is wonderful, but I miss home." "So do I," Wyatt admitted. "Is that terrible?" "We are in one of the most exciting cities in the country, and all I can think about is getting back to our ranch." "It is not terrible, it is just who we are. The ranch is in our blood, Wyatt. It is where we belong." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "But I am glad we did this. It is good to be reminded that there is a whole world out there, even if our corner of it is where our hearts are." They returned to Nevada after 2 weeks, and Wyatt had never been so happy to see the familiar landscape of sagebrush and distant mountains. The ranch was thriving, the family was healthy, and everything was exactly as it should be. The final years of the 1920s were good ones. The ranch prospered, the family grew, and Wyatt and Harper settled into a comfortable rhythm of days spent with grandchildren and occasional work. When they felt up to it, evenings spent on the porch or by the fire, content in each other's company. In 1929, when the stock market crashed and the nation plunged into economic chaos, the ranch felt the effects but weathered the storm better than many. They had always operated conservatively, never overextending themselves, and the land itself continued to produce. Times were harder, prices lower, but they survived when many others did not. Wyatt, now in his mid-60s, found himself dispensing advice and occasional financial help to neighbors who were struggling. The Morgan Ranch became known not just for quality cattle, but for the generosity of its owners, and more than one family made it through the worst of the Depression years, thanks to a well-timed loan or a job offer from Wyatt and Harper. "We have been blessed," Harper said, when Wyatt worried they were giving away too much. "When you have been blessed, you share. That is how it works." As the 1930s progressed, Wyatt's health began to decline more noticeably. The old injury to his leg, combined with the accumulated wear of 60-plus years of life, made walking increasingly difficult. He used a cane more often than not, and there were days when he did not leave the house at all. It frustrated him, made him irritable and short-tempered in a way that was unlike his usual nature. Harper bore his moods with patience, understanding what he would not say, that he was terrified of becoming completely incapacitated, of losing the independence that had always been so central to his identity. She coaxed him into gentler activities, got him interested in keeping detailed records of the ranch's history, made sure he felt useful and valued, even when his body would not cooperate. In the spring of 1936, Wyatt suffered a serious fall when his leg gave out unexpectedly. He cracked several ribs and was confined to bed for weeks. During that recovery, lying in the bed he had shared with Harper for 50 years, Watching the world outside his window continue without him, something shifted in his perspective. He stopped fighting age and limitation quite so hard. He accepted that his body was wearing out, that there were things he simply could not do anymore. And surprisingly, once he accepted it, he found a kind of peace. He had lived a full life, had built something lasting, had loved and been loved. If his body was failing, well, that was the price of living long enough to see grandchildren and great-grandchildren, to watch his legacy take root and flourish. Harper, sitting beside his bed during those long weeks of recovery, watched the change come over him and felt both relief and sadness. Relief that he was no longer torturing himself trying to be something his body could not support. Sadness that they were entering the final phase of their life together, the long goodbye that all couples must face if they are lucky enough to grow old together. "Whatever time we have left, I want to make it count," Wyatt said one afternoon, reaching for her hand. "I want to tell the grandchildren stories they will remember. I want to make sure they know where they came from, what values this family stands for. I want to leave them something more than just land and cattle." "You already have," Harper assured him. "But if you want to make sure, then we will. We will tell them everything, pass down every bit of wisdom we have earned the hard way." And they did. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren became regular visitors, sitting by Wyatt's bedside or on the porch when he felt strong enough to sit outside, listening to stories about the early days of the ranch, about the blizzard that had brought their grandparents together, about the challenges and triumphs of building a life in the unforgiving Nevada desert. Wyatt told them about the importance of hard work and determination, about treating people fairly and keeping your word. He told them about the value of partnership, of finding someone who would stand beside you through the worst storms life could throw at you. He told them, most importantly, about love, about how real love was not just a feeling, but a choice you made every day, a commitment to show up and do the work even when it was hard. The children listened with wide eyes, absorbing the lessons, and Wyatt knew that even after he was gone, something of him would remain in them, passed down through the generations. In 1940, the nation was again on the brink of war, and Wyatt, now 76 years old, watched with a heavy heart as young men prepared to go off and fight. His own grandsons were of age, and he knew it was only a matter of time before they would be called. The cycle of history seemed to be repeating itself, and he prayed that they would all come home safely as his ranch hands had from the last war. That winter was hard on him. He caught a cold that settled deep in his lungs and would not clear. Harper, terrified, called the doctor from Pahrump, who did what he could but admitted privately that Wyatt's age and overall health made recovery difficult. For weeks, Wyatt lay in bed, fighting for every breath, his vitality draining away day by day. The family gathered, understanding without being told that the end was approaching. William came every day, bringing his children and grandchildren. Catherine rode over from her own ranch and stayed in her old room. Peter, now managing much of the day-to-day ranch operations, barely left his father's side. Through it all, Harper remained constant, sitting beside Wyatt's bed, holding his hand, talking to him about everything and nothing. She told him about improvements they were planning for the ranch, about the new foal Catherine's mare had dropped, about the great-grandchildren's latest achievements. She kept him connected to the life he had built, even as that life was slipping away from him. One clear February evening, with the family assembled in the room, Wyatt rallied slightly. His breathing eased, and his eyes cleared. He looked around at all the faces watching him with love and concern, and he smiled. "I have had a good life," he said, his voice weak but clear. "I have no regrets. I built something that will last, loved, and was loved. Saw my children and grandchildren grow strong and capable." His eyes found Harper, and the love in his gaze was as strong as it had been 55 years earlier. "You gave me everything, my love, everything that mattered." Harper's eyes streamed with tears, but she smiled through them. "And you gave me the same. A life on my own terms, a partnership of equals, a family. You gave me everything too." The ranch is in good hands. I am not worried about that. William, Peter, Catherine, you know what needs to be done. Take care of each other. Take care of this place. Pass it on to your children the way Harper and I have passed it to you. His children promised through their tears, and Wyatt seemed satisfied. He closed his eyes, still holding Harper's hand, and his breathing slowly eased into sleep. He passed away peacefully just before dawn, with Harper beside him and his family nearby. He was 76 years old, had lived to see the century turn and the West transform from wild frontier to settled land, had built a legacy that would endure long after he was gone. They buried him on the hill next to Pete, overlooking the ranch he had loved so much. The funeral drew people from across the state, ranchers and townspeople, and all the lives he had touched in his 76 years. They told stories about his fairness, his generosity, his determination, his love for his family, and his land. Harper stood beside the grave, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and felt the weight of loss settle over her like a heavy blanket. 55 years they had been together. More than 3/4 of her life had been spent as his wife, his partner, his other half. The grief was overwhelming, but beneath it was gratitude. They had been given something rare and precious, a love that had lasted and deepened through all the years and challenges, and she would not trade a single day of it, even though the ending hurt so much. In the days and weeks after Wyatt's death, Harper found herself at loose ends. The ranch continued to operate, life moved forward, but she felt adrift without her anchor. William and Peter tried to keep her involved in decisions, to make sure she felt valued and needed, but it was not the same without Wyatt beside her. She took to riding out to the grave every afternoon, sitting on the hillside and talking to him as if he could still hear. She told him about the ranch, about the family, about all the little things that made up their shared life. It helped, gave her a way to process the grief and maintain the connection that had been so central to her existence. As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, Harper gradually found her footing again. She threw herself into working with the great-grandchildren, teaching them to ride and handle cattle the way she had taught her own children decades earlier. She took a more active role in Catherine's horse training operation, finding satisfaction in working with the animals. She made sure Wyatt's stories and lessons were passed on, keeping his memory alive in the family he had helped create. The war came, just as Wyatt had feared, and 3 of the grandsons went off to fight. Harper prayed for them daily, added her voice to the millions of others asking for their boys to come home safely. She kept the ranch running, made sure food and leather from their cattle went to support the war effort, did her part as she had always done. And the boys did come home, thank God. All 3 of them returned in 1945, changed by what they had seen, but alive and whole. Harper wept with relief and gratitude, wishing Wyatt could have been there to see them return. As the 1940s gave way to the 1950s, Harper entered her 80s. She was slower now, her body finally showing the accumulated wear of 8 decades of life, but her mind remained sharp and her spirit undimmed. She watched the ranch continue to prosper under William and Peter's management, watched new generations be born and grow, and felt satisfied that she and Wyatt had built something that would truly last. On what would have been their 65th wedding anniversary in 1951, Harper rode out to Wyatt's grave on her old gray mare, a descendant of the horse she had ridden that fateful night in 1885. She sat there for a long time, looking out over the ranch spread below, remembering. "We did it," she said aloud, her voice carrying on the Nevada wind. "We built something beautiful, you and I. Something that will outlast us both. I miss you every day, but I am so grateful for the life we had together." The wind picked up, rustling through the sagebrush, and Harper chose to believe it was Wyatt's answer, his agreement, his love reaching across the divide between them. Harper Thompson Morgan passed away peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1953, at the age of 87. She was buried beside Wyatt on the hill, their graves side by side overlooking the ranch they had built together. The family gathered once more, now numbering in the dozens, representing 4 generations of Morgans who could trace their line back to a man who had limped through snow to save his frozen herd and the woman who had ridden out to help him bring them in. The ranch continued, passing through the generations exactly as Harper and Wyatt had hoped. Their children aged and eventually joined them on that hill overlooking the valley. Their grandchildren took over, and then their great-grandchildren, each generation adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation that had been laid so long ago. The sign Wyatt had made for their 30th anniversary remained over the gate, weathered but still legible. Morgan Ranch, founded 1880, built on love and determination. It became a symbol of what the ranch represented, a reminder to every generation of the values and commitment that had started it all. And on winter nights, when snow fell over the Nevada desert, the current generation of Morgans would gather their children and tell them the story of how it all began, about a blizzard and a desperate man and a woman brave enough to ride into a storm to help a stranger, about how that single act of kindness had blossomed into love, and how that love had built a legacy that endured through all the challenges and changes of nearly a century. The story of Wyatt and Harper became legend in the family, a touchstone and an inspiration. It reminded them that the best things in life were built through determination and partnership, through facing challenges together and never giving up on each other or the dreams you shared. It showed them what real love looked like, not the easy passion of youth, but the deep, abiding commitment that lasted through decades of hard work and hard choices. And so the Morgan Ranch continued into the future, built on the foundation of love and determination that two remarkable people had laid down in the harsh Nevada winter of 1885, a testament to the power of courage, partnership, and a love strong enough to weather any storm.